That conversation is over. Your brain disagrees. Hours later, one sentence returns. Then a pause. Then the other person's face, reconstructed with suspicious precision. This feels like reflection, but often it is something narrower. Post-event processing, a loop that reviews a social moment as if a hidden mistake can still be found. Why does your mind keep reopening a conversation that nobody else may be thinking about? The obvious answer is regret. You said something awkward, so you examine it. But the loop can begin even when nothing clearly went wrong. A reply was shorter than expected. A joke landed quietly. Someone looked away. Your mind receives an incomplete social signal, predicts that it may mean rejection, and starts searching the past for an explanation. That search has a purpose. Social belonging matters, and noticing mistakes can improve future behavior. The problem is not remembering. It is the way the review becomes organized around threat. In 1995, psychologists David Clark and Adrian Wells described a cognitive model of social anxiety in which attention turns inward during a social situation. Instead of simply noticing the room, you begin monitoring yourself inside it. How does your voice sound? Where are your hands? Does your face look tense? You start constructing an image of how you must appear to other people, but that image is built partly from your own anxiety. Your racing heart becomes evidence that you looked nervous. Your uncertainty becomes evidence that you sounded foolish. A private feeling is quietly converted into a public fact. Then the conversation ends. The external evidence disappears, but the internal model remains. Now your mind can inspect it without interruption. The trigger was ambiguity. The interpretation was possible rejection. The response was self-focused attention. The behavior is replay. And every replay makes the threatening interpretation easier to retrieve next time. Psychologists Stanley Rachman and colleagues Jacqueline Gruder-Andrew and Roz Shafran gave this after-the-fact review a clearer shape in 2000. They studied what happened after anxiety-provoking or embarrassing social events. Recollections were often recurrent and intrusive. They could interfere with concentration. More intense post-event processing was associated with greater social anxiety and with avoiding similar situations. That does not mean replaying one conversation gives you a disorder. It does not mean every uncomfortable memory is harmful. It means researchers could measure a recognizable pattern. A social event ends, but attention remains attached to it, returning without producing a clean resolution. Why does the loop feel useful? Because it resembles problem solving. Each replay carries a small promise. One more pass might reveal what happened. Maybe the silence meant disapproval. Maybe the delayed message confirms it. Maybe a better sentence can be prepared for next time. But genuine problem solving usually changes something. It produces a decision, an action, or a stopping point. Post-event processing often produces another version of the same question. What did they think of you? The evidence is missing, so the mind substitutes simulation. Picture a simple interaction in a psychology study. Two people speak. One is already worried about being judged. During the exchange, that person notices a dry mouth, a hesitant phrase, a moment of eye contact that felt too short. The conversation itself contains dozens of neutral details, but attention gives extra weight to the details connected to embarrassment. The next day, the memory does not return as a recording. It returns as a reconstruction. In another 2000 study, Tana Mellings and Lynn Alden brought socially anxious and non-anxious participants into a social interaction. There were 58 people in each group. The researchers measured self-focused attention, physical sensations, behavior, later post-event processing, and memory for the exchange. Their results linked selective attention to negative self-related information with biased judgments and recollections. Post-event processing also contributed to recalling negative self-related information. The important word is selective. Your mind does not need to invent an event from nothing. It can build a darker account by repeatedly selecting one part of a real event. The stumble stays. The smooth recovery fades. The strange pause remains. The other person's friendly opening becomes background. This is the counterintuitive part. Replay can feel like an attempt to make memory more accurate while making your evaluation less balanced. Memory researcher Bethany Teachman and psychologist Megan Cody tested a related question in 2010. Participants with high or low social anxiety symptoms gave speeches. They received standardized feedback about their own performance and a confederate's performance, then completed memory tests immediately and again after 2 days. The researchers did not find a simple bias in every kind of recall. That boundary matters. But they did find differences in recognition. The high anxiety group remembered negative feedback about themselves as worse, and their memory for positive feedback diminished over time. Post-event processing statistically helped explain the link between social anxiety and memory for negative feedback. So the evidence is not that memory becomes pure fiction. It is subtler. Repeated negative review can influence which interpretation remains available and how personal feedback feels when it is recognized later. That also explains why reassurance sometimes fails. A friend says the conversation was fine. For a moment, the loop loosens. Then your mind produces a detail the friend did not witness, or a facial expression that cannot be checked, or a tone that seems impossible to describe. The uncertainty survives because certainty was never available. And uncertainty is fuel. The loop can become self-reinforcing. You predict that a mistake occurred. That prediction directs attention toward evidence of failure. The selected evidence increases discomfort. Discomfort makes the event feel important. Importance invites more replay. Then the stronger memory becomes evidence that the event must have been serious. But vividness is not a verdict. A recent scoping review by Aidan Flynn and K. Lira Yoon, published in 2025, brought together the modern research on post-event processing. They found that it appears more often after performance situations than ordinary social interactions, is related to negative memory biases, and has a two-way relationship with worsening performance appraisals. In plain language, replay can darken how you judge your performance, while a dark judgment can invite more replay. The review also identified unfinished questions. Researchers still need to clarify the process over time and determine exactly when post-event processing causes worsening social anxiety rather than merely accompanying it. That uncertainty prevents a dramatic claim, but it strengthens a useful distinction. Not every review is rumination. Not every awkward memory is distorted. Not every person who replays a conversation is socially anxious. The pattern becomes recognizable when thought keeps circling self-evaluation without gaining new evidence. Modern communication gives that circle more material. A conversation no longer ends at the door. It leaves a message history, a read receipt, a typing indicator, a video call image of your own face, and a gap before the next reply. Each artifact looks like evidence. Most of it is ambiguous, so you check the wording again. You compare response times. You examine whether the final message needed an emoji. The mind treats tiny digital traces as clues to a social verdict that was never formally delivered. The environment changes, but the mechanism stays familiar. Trigger, prediction, self-monitoring, selective memory, replay, then a slightly more threatening prediction before the next interaction. You may enter that next conversation carrying the previous one. Attention turns inward sooner. You rehearse more carefully. You avoid a joke. You explain too much. You watch the other person's reactions so closely that listening becomes harder. The review that promised to protect the next interaction can quietly alter it. What would separate reflection from the loop? Not forced positivity. Not pretending every conversation went perfectly. The evidence suggests a simpler dividing line, whether the thought reaches new information or action. Reflection can notice a specific mistake, place it beside the rest of the event, and end with a proportionate conclusion. The loop keeps asking an unanswerable question about how you appeared inside someone else's mind. That distinction is humane. Your mind is not replaying the scene because it enjoys embarrassment. It is trying to reduce social uncertainty with a tool that cannot produce the missing evidence. Once that is visible, the memory can be treated as a reconstruction rather than a courtroom recording. The uncomfortable detail may be real. The verdict attached to it may still be a prediction. And perhaps the quiet question left behind is not whether you should trust every memory, but whether every replay deserves another hearing. That conversation is over. Your brain is only still trying to decide what it meant.